Test, 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 test. All right, we're going to get started today, and thank you for taking the time to come here, and we thank you for just the opportunity that we get to share with you today. So today we're going to be talking about exploring welding career pathways with hands-on learning methodologies, training methodologies. So want to just share with you some of the features that we have and some of the things that we are going to be kind of focusing on today is really just how do we get that, how do I say this? How do we get your career work paths online while exploring our welding pathways? So the focus today is engaging students with hands-on welding tools, also addressing classroom management and safety concerns, looking at how to implement innovative welding solutions and create an interactive classroom, and then preparing students with knowledge and proper welding technique. We are going to be doing all that while this is recorded. If you do have questions, feel free to, up in the left-hand corner, there should be a place for a chat. You can ask your questions. We will have a question and answer time at the end as well. But as we go through here, want to just show and focus on our different products here and what's going on in that world. So today we're going to be talking about the just our kind of focus in traditional kind of career and technical education. So there are a lot of different things that we can put together to include within CTE. And what we're going to do is just kind of talk through and work through how we go about and what are some of the ways, pathways to get your students to different careers within the welding world. So first thing, engage students with hands-on welding training tools to further career path exploration. So really what we have and what we've created is something called the kind of looking at the 21st century welding classroom. And what we're doing here is allowing students and allowing teachers to be able to really open up and to engage their classroom in a different way, kind of asking the question of how do we get students on the path to a welding career. And so in this case, we have different products that we have included in this classroom, this kind of typical classroom setup, but each one goes through and we'll explain each one today, but really is the focus on how do we engage your students and get them there. Well, first off, there's a need. So getting students on the career pathway is really focusing that, hey, there is jobs available. There's a need for skilled welders. By 2025, there's a need for about 400,000 replacement and new welders. So there is a need in this career pathway. And so getting students to understand that, yes, there are good paying jobs, there are openings that are available for them if they have skills and they can get developed in that case. Now, again, when I say good paying jobs, the average welder makes just under 50,000. And so it's one of those things where if the student can get in at the ground level, they can work their way up, but they can even make larger amounts with benefits, with different opportunities for advancement within their world. So one of the ways we can do that is through getting them understanding and being a part of employability skills. We have a curriculum that goes through 19 different lessons on employability skills. The Real Career Employability Skills focus here is really tying together the idea of what you learn in the classroom, how do you actually go and get a job? What do you do in that case? So in this case, we have 19 different lessons that include things like problem solving, time management, interviews, self-confidence, stress management, things that can help your students gain employment. And, you know, when we say employability skills, we're really talking about soft skills. There's a need for soft skills in the world of work today. And how do we help our students to get that understanding? Now, the other thing that we can do is we can help to get our students kind of on a path to understanding and keeping them engaged within the classroom. So what we have here is what we would call our formula for skill-focused engagement. Really getting students to be engaged and understand what the purpose of what they're doing is. So in this case, we have skill development, and what we're looking for is really kind of focusing on our skill development here is really focusing on things like how do we get our students to get the basic concepts. Once they get the basic concepts, we go into skill refinement. How do we get them to now refine those skills? They understand what they're doing, but hey, we need the practice. We need the ability to be able to kind of hone those skills. And then move into skill performance, being able to perform the skills that are expected for job and careers in the workforce. Then finally, skill sharing. How do you then get those students to share those skills with others to understand what they can do? So when we're talking in this 21st century classroom world, what we kind of have is, and what we're going to talk about different products today, is kind of a solution for you. So our welding simulation lab is what we would call our skill development. It's where students can get in there, and it has a connection with creativity, but it's the skill development where they're really learning the understanding and the knowledge of welding technique, how to do it correctly, how to learn and learn from their mistakes, and then as they make mistakes, how to not do those again. So creativity comes in here and really helps students understand, oh, okay, what am I doing? How do I make it better? What do I do to be even a better learner and get better skills in that world? Then we get into skill refinement, into our live welding booths. When you go into the welding booth now's the time to actually do the refinement. How am I doing? Am I getting an understanding of welding? What do I need to do in the real welding booth, getting that understanding? Still getting guidance, but how do I do that? This brings about collaboration with using what you're doing with and helping with your teachers with different assessment tools, making sure that you're doing it correctly. Next one then is our skill performance. Critical thinking, now using things like our weld defect kit to get a critical and understanding performance of what am I doing right, how do I get it and make it better. And then things in the sense of skill communication, skill sharing is things like our bend tester, being able to show and use our bend tester to be able to say, hey, this is now the standard of how you would get a job. You would bend your weld, you would see if it would pass and get it to a qualification. And that is my sharing. That is my communication, that I know what I'm doing. And then, of course, we also have our soft skills, which is another skill performance and critical thinking of how do I now show that I am acceptable or I could be better at this level of training than somebody else. So looking at some ways to address classroom management and safety concerns in your classroom. Well, there's a lot of challenges out there. Some of those include things like creating individualized learning for your students, because you have students who are at different levels, different understandings. You also have to manage the classroom and the students effectively. You have some, I would call your high flyers. You have others that you need to work and really kind of quote unquote hold their hand as they work through and get an understanding of welding. You have some who have a background of welding, some who come in, don't know anything about welding. So how do you work and manage with those students? And then there's also keeping safety a priority. Safety is always a priority. It's something that you have to be involved with, not only from a classroom level, but if you are not just an instructor, but your CT director, your principals, and your superintendent have to make sure that students are being safe. And then does it align with the standards, and are we keeping best practices? And in this case, it's important that we are continuing to have students to align with their standards and making sure that they are getting what is needed to be on that career path moving forward. Now, a few things here. Today's average high school welding lab has about 8 booths in it. There's about 22 students on average, and within that classroom you can see already that there's more students than there are welding booths. So there's this need to see, how do we engage all my students, even though I may not have a welding booth or a welder that everyone can actually do. I've been in schools that go from as low as 4 or 5 welding booths, some that are all the way up to, a bay of them, and they have 20 welding booths. And so it varies from school to school, but how do you keep every student engaged? How do you keep them interacting? So the other piece of it is there's about 33% of students who have some sort of cognitive disability. They have some issue that maybe makes it harder for them to learn. Maybe it is an emotional behavior disability where, certain things that they do, there could be a safety issue if they get frustrated with things or they aren't understanding it correctly. And so there's different ways and different type of management pieces that you have to work with your students. So What we want you to do and what you want to be thinking about in that world is, how do you reduce that liability? Well, there are things like high voltage and high heat. There's power equipment that is being used, and then there's also that high frustration level. That high frustration level, sometimes if you don't get it right away, you have to continue to learn, continue to work on it over and over again. That leads to also high tolerance levels as well. And when we're talking tolerance levels, there are certain types of skills that you need that are very high tolerance. It's got to be very specific, very exact. Otherwise, it wouldn't be considered a passing skill. And so sometimes that can lead to the frustration, that can lead to the need for more practice and more issues. So how do you reduce those liabilities? Well, I would say you increase learning. That first one comes from learning by doing. All of our products that we have, there is a safety training as well as test in the curriculum. So when you do our GuideWeld virtual reality, GuideWeld VR, welding simulator, there's actually classroom paper and pencil, PowerPoint projection, excuse me, and safety training that you go through. And then there's also a test that your students can take. And we suggest having them do that test and get 100% on it. Why is that important? Because it includes and it helps your students to be able to kind of have a benchmark of, I have to be here before I can actually use any of those high voltage power tools that we have, or the simulator or the welders out there in the shop. At the same time, we would say that practice can make prep work easier. What I mean by that is that by having increased learning, by practicing, by having students get more and more, if we would say arc time, or in our case, simulated arc time, you get to learn through the standards a lot better. You get to understand and prep your knowledge and really work on that before you go and use the real thing. It also helps to learn through the standards before teacher evaluation. So really have the students be able to do that practice, know what they're going to be graded on, and be able to do that and have a very high confidence level that when it's time for teacher evaluations, I'm ready to do that. There's also that piece of the safety check before using equipment. If students aren't able to pass certain grades in the virtual world, don't let them go on to the real thing. If they're not able to pass a safety test, they shouldn't be using the equipment as well. Those types of features that you can put into your classroom just help you with reducing that safety factor. Now, moving on, we have how to implement innovative welding solutions that create an interactive classroom. And so I want to talk about that formula again of how do we show engagement. Really, it's that skill development, moving to that skill refinement, skill performance, and skill sharing. Just to kind of flesh that out a little bit, we use the 4 C's of creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and showed you a slide before this on that. And really, it's that skill development, creating tangible ways to develop and understand concepts. Practice and learn key systems and technical kind of or technique development. So learning that skill development first is going to be most important. Getting students to say, hey, I have the skill, I can do this skill. That will then lead to them to engaging into a welding career pathway. So if they can say, hey, I have some talent in this, I can do this, I understand what I'm doing, that leads to them getting to actually move that. That can also be the creativity that they need of, oh, wow, there's something I'm good at. I should keep on getting more and more invested in this. I can move down that way. That's the engagement part. Then moves to your skill refinement. How do we engage, or how do we get our students to collaborate in this sense? And that's through enhanced skill through rigorous assessments, rigorous assessment and experiences. So get them to be collaborating, working with other students, helping and understanding how's it working, and then also the best practices in industry standard learning. So getting them to do this, the best practice, so when they're in that skill refinement, they're seeing, hey, these are the kinds of work that I will do in industry. This is the type of test that I'll need to take to actually get this. I'll have to bend my welds to be able to show that I can actually perform these welds. Getting that skill refinement. And then skill performance is just that, getting them to perform over and over again and be able to show and really kind of identify what their individual strengths and talents are. getting them to critically think about how does this, of what my skills that I have, how does that then pertain to getting a career and getting myself into a job one day. And then finally, skill sharing. How do I then make that where I have the skill, I've refined it, I can perform it. Now, how do I share that? How do I get that job? That's that communication piece. Not only with peer-to-peer of, hey, this is what you're doing, this is what I can do, but how do you then bring it into the career exploration? And we feel that if you can do these things, it will then bring you into our world of the 21st century classroom, where you start with that skill development in the using virtual reality simulation. You move it into our welding booths with our GuideWeld Live products. You then get into assessment and do visual and then also destructive testing, and then finish it off with career soft skills in that world. So if your student starts in the classroom here, here's our little welder. He or she can then move from that classroom experience using virtual reality, move them into the booth, actually do live guidance, and then move to our virtual inspection, both visual and then also moving to the bend tester and do some of that actual physical bending and qualifying in welding. Now, as you can see, I have 4 different kind of icons of a person here. The other piece that is engaging here is that, like we said, not all students can be in one place or doing one project. If you have 22 students on average, you have 5 to 8 welding booths. Not everyone can be in the welding booth. So you can be moving your students around. Having them engage and be active in the classroom gets that engagement as well. Having some students working in one part of the classroom, moving out and doing welds, they have problems, come back in the classroom. Going from the visual inspection back to the booth to see, am I doing it correctly? That brings engagement as well, that movement and interaction. So how do we prepare students with knowledge and proper welding technique? What we would say is virtual reality is a great way to do that. This is from an Iowa State study showing that virtual reality can increase welding technique, increase the ability of students to create qualified welds, and then it also can reduce the amount of time needed to do these welds, so you have more time to do practice and to reduce cost as well. So some of that research has shown that with simulation, so you can see the blue line is traditional training. The red line is virtual reality integration. So you would do kind of that classroom understanding, you do virtual reality, then you'd go out to the booth to do welding. They actually had a 25% increase in qualified participants. More students are getting more understanding, better understanding, and more qualified understanding in their welding by using welding simulation. Same thing, a bigger jump in a different, in the flat position here, using a different type of welding position, and in this case, 65%. So you can see that that virtual reality integration is actually helping people to understand and students to understand welding quicker. It also can be something that there's less cost then. By using welding simulation, it decreases consumable welding costs within your shop or your class. So kind of bringing this kind of implementation guide here, we have our products, and some of our products here are our GuideWeld VR. This product does both MIG and stick welding. It hooks right up to your computer, so it's a USB connection. There's no installation or licensing fee that you have, and so it's a local, hooks right up to your computer. Inside of the virtual world, this is a picture of the virtual world, you actually have guides that help you to see if you have your work angle correct, your travel angle correct, your speed correct or not, and then you actually do virtual welding. When you're done with your weld, it grades you. Inside of the gun has different icons, and it grades you on your work angle, travel angle, plate distance or arc length for a stick, and then your speed and your straightness. And it tells you what you're doing correct and then what you're doing not so well and how to correct those different things. Inside of the welding booth, moving into that next world is the GuideWeld Live product. In this case, this is the product where you want to move into the booth. You want to now have your students be able to have some guidance. Inside of the welding helmet has guidance pieces of work angle, travel angle, and speed. These then get your students to be able to do live welds in the booth, but have some guidance to know, hey, am I going the right speed? Is my work angle right? Is my travel angle right? What am I doing to make sure that I have those things correct? It's not a simulator. It's actually a welding helmet that you put into your welding booth. It has an auto darkening helmet, and it improves welding technique by developing and increases welder confidence while in the booth, while doing live welds. As they're doing their weld, they have instant feedback telling them, oh, it's wrong or it's correct, and how do I correct those things? So while they're doing a weld, they don't have to wait until afterwards to say, oh, I just had a bad habit the whole time. They actually can do it ahead of time. So here's a picture of just one student who had just the changing of using the helmet without the helmet. You can see that their ability to have a straight weld, being able to have more consistency just by being able to focus on and giving that speed guidance, that work angle, that travel guidance helped in the top one there versus the bottom. Another great one that we have is our weld defect kit. And our weld defect kit, the great features here is that these are all actual welds. They're just plastic welds. They're molds that had gone right over our welds. All the welds were created by a certified welding inspector. And by doing the welds, we then took that exact sample and we basically molded right over top. So with each weld, there is very high definition, very just great texture to be able, and detail to be able to show undercut, to be able to show overlap or a lack of fusion or concavity or convexity. So it shows all those different features there for you, so you can actually kind of help your students to understand, hey, this is what it looks like. And then we have great things like our cards that are flashcards that help students to be able to understand, and posters to help them understand, if I did have overlap, how did that happen? Was it my fault or was it the machine? And what do I need to do to correct it? So they can then look at these and then go on and be able to correct those issues. Then we also have our bend tester. And this is a great bend test product here. It tells your students and it teaches your students not only how to bend the weld, but how to prepare for a bend test. A lot of times for your students, if you're talking about welding career pathways, how are you going to get your students into the world of careers? They're going to have to do a bend test when they go on site to actually get a job. So in this case, your students will be able to do bend tests in the classroom or in the lab, in the workshop, and be able to say, see, if I wanted to go to get a job, would I actually be able to pass a guided bend test? Would I be able to do a weld, show that I did it correctly, bend it, and then be able to say, yep, yes, I would have passed because this is my quality weld here, and it would pass AWS standards. So this is a great feature for you to be able to show, and then also it comes with curriculum that allows for students to understand what are the qualification features of it. How do I make sure that I am qualifying my welds? All of our products then also have welding curriculum. So as not only is it important that your students get the hands-on learning, but also the in-classroom. Understanding the techniques is important, but it's also the knowledge behind all the welding. Why do you do this? And if there's a problem with your welding, what do I need to do to change it? That's where the welding curriculum comes in and gives that for your students. Finally then, just to finalize this 21st century welding classroom and how to get students in the pathways and moving down this is getting your students to engage within this world, moving them kind of step by step down the path to better understanding. And as they do that, then you can help increase their knowledge and get them to hone their skills to become a better welder. We also have welding packages that you can jumpstart your program. If you don't have any of this, or you want to start, or you need to revamp, we have different packages as well as individual products that you can get within this pathways to really kind of amp up your classroom. So with that time, we have a few minutes left. I don't see any questions, but if there are any questions, feel free to type those in or ask those questions before we head out. I do want to say thank you for this time. I thank you for coming and taking the time to do this. I hope that it has been helpful. And if you ever have any more questions, you can always contact us at information@realityworks.com, and we can give more information, or you can call us toll free at 800-830-1416. Either of those ways, we can then get you information, get you on the path to really helping your students and helping what's going on. So one question is asked is, will you make the slideshow available to us? Yes. As soon as we are done with this, we will be sending this slideshow out to all the participants so you can see this. And if you have questions, we'd be happy to, again, help you and talk with you about those. So thank you for that. All right. We have another one. Oh, just looks like they're saying thank you. So, all right. Appreciate your time. If there's no other questions, thank you for taking the time with us today. And if you do have more questions, please feel free to contact us. And we love to help, love to be involved with student learning and the opportunity to share in that world. So thank you for your time. And we hope that this was helpful for you today.